All right, so here are today's notes over one of our last topics in this, which is called percent composition. Okay, and basically it's what makes things up. Okay, so on the top of the worksheet, you'll see it says, what are you made of? And there are two ways to look at it, but one of the examples I always like to give is you've all heard about how the human body is 70% water. And the way they figured that out is by weighing the total body and figuring out how much of that is water. So there are two ways to do this. There's percent composition by number and percent composition by mass. Now, by mass, by number is simply calculating how many pieces are part of the total. And by mass is figuring out how much mass is part of the total. So there's a lot of examples. I've got a couple here that I can give you. So let's pick another one out and let's do salt. Actually, no, let's do peroxide, H2O2. Okay. Now, by number, there are 4 pieces in there. And if I were to ask you the hydrogen or the oxygen, it's 2 out of 4 hydrogen and 2 out of 4 oxygen. So it is 50% by number for each one. But mass is a different story. So now the hydrogen weighs 1, the hydrogen weighs 1, the oxygen weighs 16, and there's an additional oxygen that weighs 16, meaning our grand total is now 34. Out of that 34, 2 out of 34 are the hydrogen, and 32 out of 34 are the oxygen. So our first piece here, 2 out of 34, ends up being 5.8% by mass hydrogen. Obviously, when you go do the math, both pieces have to equal up to 100. So if this would be 94.2% oxygen by mass. So an example here, the FFA always has some holiday fruit sales coming up, and if you look here right now, you can see a bag of apples and oranges. Now, this bag of apples and oranges might weigh 10 pounds, okay? But there are two ways to look at it. It might be saying that 4 pounds of the 10 pounds are apples, which would be 40%, right? But you could also say, hey, there are 40 pieces in there, and out of the 40 pieces, 10 of the pieces out of the 40 are apples, which would mean that it's 25% by number. The top one, obviously with the pounds, would be by mass. This would be 25% by number. Obviously, depending upon what we're looking at, apples and oranges aren't exactly always going to be the same mass. So we could look at this in either one of two ways. If I were to call ahead and order pizza, or say we were running through a buffet, and I said, hey, I'm bringing in my football team, well, do you think it would matter to the restaurant and the people making the pizza as to whether or not I was bringing in a high school team or a youth team? Absolutely, it would make a difference, okay? You might bring in the same number of players. You might bring in 60 players, right? But you also could be changing, so you could say, oh, 10 of the 60 are sophomores. And that would be by number. But it would be very different if we weighed the players and said, hey, I've got 4,000 pounds of football players coming, and 1,000 of those pounds are sophomores. That would be 25% by mass, as opposed to up here, 10 out of 60 by number. One of the key things you're going to have to do is grab your periodic tables that I gave you out, and down here in the bottom corner, you're going to need to go and find the term that says atomic weight. That number is going to give us the mass. So whenever you see any formula with letters and symbols, you come find it on here, and then you need to find that number in the top right corner, which is the atomic mass. So let's go to the worksheet. It's on the back side, I think, of the second thing I gave you, and let's try doing a couple of these. The H and H2O, okay? We built this the other day. Water is a molecule that contains 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So there are 3 pieces. There are 3 pieces in water, right? H2O. 2 H's, 1 O, 3 pieces, okay? How many of those pieces are H? Well, 2 out of 3, or 66% by number. Now, on the mass side of things, we're going to have to go and find our periodic tables. And when I go to the periodic table, I find out that hydrogen weighs 1. There are 2 hydrogens, and oxygen weighs 16, giving me a grand total of 18. 2 of 18 is the number we're looking for. And after doing the math there, I come up with that I've got roughly 11% of this compound by mass is hydrogen. There are a grand total of, I think, about 8 of these on here. I want you to go ahead and work through the first one, which was by mass, the second one, which is by number. I will post an answer key to these tomorrow. Also, tomorrow when you come back, I will have another gizmo for you to work on density. And then on Thursday, I will have the unit review. Friday, we will have our quiz. And then on Friday, we will interview the next chapter. So hopefully you can find your materials there. So remember, as you go through all these examples, you're looking for 2 things. You're looking for how many pieces are in the formula, and then so you need to know the pieces, count them out, and then you need to go to the periodic table, and you need to find the mass from the table. Email me if you have questions. I will try and answer them.